Welcome to Dead Genre Chronicles, a critical podcast on the diversity of JRPGs. Drawing from the origin of the genre to the present day, every month we play through a JRPG and we invite you to play along and send us your questions and thoughts on it. I'm Organized Devin.
Fuck.
Did I catch you off guard?
You really got me. I was waiting for another bit, and that was the joke, and that's too good. I'm Becky. I failed the QTE for laughing at Devin's joke.
I'm Leroy, and thou hast not won even once.
I knew you were going to go for that.
Oh, man.
I was half expecting it to be, and I hast not won even once, but...
No, you have to get the whole
reciting
line.
It.
So this month, we're going to be talking about Shadow Hearts, a dark fantasy RPG structured like a Monster of the Week anime that is very... PS2.
Yeah.
It's like PS1 holdover, but yeah, that's also PS2.
I feel like we've talked a lot about stuff that's like certain companies got their start toward the beginning of a new generation and they're still developing like they're for the last generation. Like we had Wild Arms, which felt like a kind of wonky SNES game, and Wild Arms 2 doesn't feel quite like that. But this is weird, because they fucking made a game in this series on the PlayStation 1. So, I don't know how to react to that.
The game has a very obvious Disc 1 and Disc 2 feel to it, so I was like, huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true as well, actually. I mean, the most PS1 thing is that it's a 3D models against pre-rendered backgrounds thing. But then, actually, that wasn't that rare in the early days of the PS2. It's not the only game that's like that.
And if a game was 2D on the PS2, it was usually pre-rendered backgrounds. Actually, that's not true. It was also often models. Never mind. It's like an even split.
That definitely varies with genre, though.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this is an interesting one from a formal point of view. If nothing else, after playing a bunch of kind of older games that are very dungeon crawly, this game has really short dungeons, and that was quite welcome.
It has like short dungeons even relative to the average pre-rendered RPG, honestly. Like we're talking dungeons that are 2 or 3 rooms, you just kind of walk in and walk out. Also, the encounter rate's pretty low in them too.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes they're 2 or 3 rooms, but you go through those 2 or 3 rooms 7 times.
Yeah.
Like the Dollhouse, which is basically a cut-down Resident Evil level.
It's certainly a Resident Evil 1 pastiche in an RPG, which is really weird to transplant like that.
I really liked it, actually. I thought it worked really well, but I like that kind of very placey sort of game.
I hate number puzzles, they're dumb. I mean, yeah, thank God for walkthroughs, but...
Yeah.
Shadow Hearts does the thing, only in the post... No, not even in the post-game, it's in the Orphanage too, where you need to examine random parts of the environment, and they'll give you a date, and then you need to know that, oh, I'm supposed to type in the date as the password over here.
The protagonist will be like, oh, what number is March? And it's just like... Why are you wondering that aloud, you dumb idiot? But it's supposed to be a hint.
It's obvious if you played horror games.
Yeah.
But if you've never played them before, you just be like, what the fuck?
And that I feel like that's kind of the residue of Kodelka being a survival horror more than like a straight RPG. And Kodelka is the PlayStation 1 game set in the same universe that I mentioned, whose fucking title character shows up in this game as one of the party's mom. And, like, the mysterious voice that is tormenting the protagonist. This game has a weird relationship with mysticism of every stripe at once.
It's greedy in the way it uses mysticism, and it really that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of, like, old Doctor Who. Right? The way...
Yeah.
I don't know Doctor Who at all.
Old Doctor Who... Apart from when they're doing the big famous storylines about like the Daleks or the Cybermen or whatever, when they're just doing random time travel episodes, it's just, oh, this week we thought of a wacky like period we want to go to, we're just going to go there and have hijinks. And it's a bit like the Star Trek holodeck episodes as well, where they'll just be like, this time we're going to be Sherlock Holmes. But with Shadow Hearts, instead of it being like historical settings, it's mythological or folk cultural. things that they play with. Hence the kind of Monster of the Week feel.
Yeah.
Well, it is actually both, because you're in a pre-World War I setting, but it's like super fictionalized and inaccurate as hell.
Yeah, I mean it's window dressing. It's not a historical work.
No.
Yeah, it's not the sort of thing that like you would compare to like Assassin's Creed, which does try to write a feasible alternate hidden history. This is just like, we're going to set this in this particular time and make it so the villain is trying to prevent World War I by killing all of humanity.
Yeah, I was going to say, though, the goofy thing is that it actually thematically really relies on being pre-World War I and at one point Japanese-occupied China, but nothing is historically accurate.
Well, I think like the thing that's really interesting to me is two halves of the game. The first half of the game, or really the first third of the game, is set in Japanese-occupied China in early 1913, and then it goes to late 1913 in Europe. And they have very different presentations of history, because in the Shanghai section, okay, it's not historically accurate, but it has some idea of, here are the tensions that are at work between the Chinese people and the Japanese soldiers, and a handful of other interests. So you meet Marguerite, who's, I think, officially an American agent.
She's French.
She said her home's Paris, and she's a contract agent, so she doesn't even have allegiance to country, which makes stuff weird.
The impression I got was the person she was reporting to and was currently paying her was an American. I might be wrong about that.
I wouldn't. That could be feasible. It would either be American or Russian, given the way her character's designed, or USSR.
It's deep lore.
Actually, before World War I,
no,
it's never mind. It's American, but whatever.
Yeah, but there was a sense that they were trying to do something with that history, which is like, it's interesting to see that acknowledged in a Japanese game from the turn of this century, right? That yes, Japan invaded and occupied China, and that wasn't a good thing, even if, like, the plot then goes, well, maybe it wasn't a good thing, but also Chinese mystics trying to defend China by blowing up the world, it was bad. There's some weird politics behind that symbolism. But then you move to Europe, and there isn't a sense that you interact with politics while you're in Europe at all. Yeah, sure, eventually you discover that the villain wants to destroy the world to prevent World War I occurring. It's kind of, I mean, for him, it's a prophecy, but also nobody really is surprised by the idea. But there's none of the bits of Europe you go to are militarily active. You don't interact with any political figures, really. In some ways, it's quite nice to see a picture of pre-war Europe that goes to kind of isolated rural places that are still very 19th century in their style. You know, Bistritz, the village that you go to in the first part of the Europe storyline, it's just a rural farming village with almost no evidence of the 20th century yet. Which, you know, there's the same kind of grain of truth to that as there is to the Shanghai section. But the game clearly wants to care about politics in East Asia in a way that it doesn't want to care about politics in Europe, even while the plot hinges on an acknowledgement of what politics in Europe were at the time. Have I said something unutterably stupid?
No. I was just thinking about it because I didn't actually make that connection at all. Because it's completely true. Like Albert Simon, that's his name, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The not Roger Bacon. He's politically motivated, but his politics are 1,000 years old, and they don't actually have precedent or make any more sense in the age that he is now trying to destroy the world in.
Yeah.
And yeah, pre-war Europe is portrayed as like really idyllic, and they have more clear tensions of, you know, how peace can be achieved by force, like obviously in Shanghai, where it's not really peace. It's like worse, basically. But like without any engagement of European colonialism, it shows Europe as just like a very peaceful place. And this war is going to be the one thing that'll mess it all up when that's not really true. Like, the war isn't something that just happened for a random reason, right? It's been like boiling over this whole time because of European politics.
Yeah, I think the game gets away with it because the people that you deal with in Europe, none of them are in a position to know about things outside their town walls, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you go to London, you don't deal with political figures from London.
You deal with orphans.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a Dickensian presentation of London, or it's very heavily influenced by the kind of Oliver Twist type story of, urchins and predatory Victorian-style capitalists and stuff, which, that's how London before World War I is presented in kind of prevailing culture. There's no sense of England, the imperial power. There's no sense of the relations between the monarchies of Europe that was still really important at that time.
Also, it is also worth saying this is, throughout the entirety of Europe, you deal with extremely small snippets. Like, the entirety of London, you see 2 streets and an orphanage.
Yeah.
And that's it. And also, the monastery that looks like a cult hideout that is a cult hideout.
Yep.
I mean, that's part of the aims of horror, though, too. Like,
Not
the political stuff and...
Sorry, I goofed. Not monastery. Well, monastery is a completely different thing. I was thinking of the sanitarium.
Hospital?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, of course, there's a mental hospital.
I completely forgot about that dungeon.
I remember that one distinctly for some reason. Actually has a pretty good layout, despite being a stupid everything else. But, oh geez, what was I even saying? Oh yeah, one of the aims of horror is, making, it takes this, what would be a seedy underbelly in, a drama, or, just, normal-ass fiction, but then making it, larger-than-life, supernatural, allegorical, metaphorical. And so, Shadow Hearts is just... It's not heroics, it's just, these awful things that only these characters can see and fix. And they go around doing stuff like that. So, I mean, that's why I wouldn't normally see something influenced by horror be historical, because they're not really compatible.
Yeah, for sure. And you can see that in when we were warming up for this, we mentioned that there's let's call it an indirect Lovecraftian influence here, and you see that in Lovecraft, right? Lovecraft stories have no grasp of actual politics at all, because they're so invested in this, primitive spaces are creepy kind of crypto-fascism. That's the way in which, when folklore is reappropriated or misappropriated by institutional powers, and I'd include a company making a video game in that category, that's how it becomes reactionary. That's how its function of allegorizing power becomes diluted. So there's this story from American oral histories of slavery about the slave woman who tells the white historian, I was scared of the overseers because they were so pale they looked like ghosts. It's an expression of politics, but when it becomes part of the official history, it becomes, look how backwards these people are. The whole message gets flipped. And that's kind of what's going on in Shadow Hearts, is we're being left just with the fantasy bit, rather than anything that it's an allegory for. You have the figure of the Baron in the castle, who is distant and an uncertain relationship to the town, who's the vampire. But there's no sense of what the powerful, mysterious man in the castle mythology around the vampire actually means in terms of its politics, because he turns out to be a good guy. Even if it's, Keith Valentine.
Yeah.
I think this might be irresponsible criticism on my part, but ironically, because Shadow Hearts has very, very low ambitions, it doesn't feel that othering, basically. Because a lot of the way it portrays stuff is just its own fiction, even though it obviously is appropriating things. There's something to be said about how fast it appropriates things and throws them away, but at the same time, what I liked about Shadow Hearts is that it's not ignorant of politics, but its own politic or its own statement is just really, really simple, and it's very similar to an average action manga, basically.
To its credit, I suppose, it's always asking for empathy for kind of ordinary people, let's say.
Even off the bat, Duhai is in the text as just to be another side to Zuzan, and that Zuzan kind of even agrees with him and feels sorry for him, but he wouldn't go to that kind of measures, except Zuzan says to the Japanese army's face, if you land on Shanghai right now, I will side with Duhai, right? His want to stop Duhai is really tenuous and has to do with what's happening at that moment in Shanghai. So like Shadow Hearts doesn't have like the absolute morality, which is like why I feel like it's not really judging the things it presents. And yeah, it is sometimes Shadow Hearts feels kind of empty because it's just dumb. It's not very smart with the stuff it's saying and doing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't feel othering, I guess, to me. It doesn't feel off-putting either. Even though it's just like treating like tons of aesthetics as like a toy box. It's trying to have its heart in the right place. And it's just very stupid.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, yeah, toy box is a good way of putting it. There's a whole gulf between this and a game that was actually sophisticated in how it handled all these representations, in which it would be a worse game. You know, you could make it, if it engaged a bit more with some of its symbolism, it would very quickly go astray, and it would take a lot
especially if it's the exact same writer, but trying a bit harder. It would just be like, geez, stop.
Yeah. I think in some ways, where this game tries hard, and in some things it tries extremely hard, it at least tries hard at relatively harmless stuff, like boss designs.
Well, and I appreciate that, like, maybe the most real parts of it come from, like, actual Japanese experience, like, unpacking the relationship between Imperial Japan and China comes from, like, basically, like, looking back on your nation's past and being like, you know, this stuff was fucked up. But like, it's turned into a set piece for the manga arc, but...
Yeah.
Well, also, like... The reflection on Japanese imperialism ends with a new Caligari moment. You know, a city is destroyed by an explosion in defense against imperialism. And one could, if one wanted, and I don't think Shadow Hearts particularly wants to, and I'm not sure we should give it credit for that, but one could, if one wanted, pull something reflective out of that too, about the position of Japan relative to nuclear attacks and nuclear power.
It's like bizarrely hard to talk about Shadow Hearts because it's operating with symbolism and metaphors and imagery that are really complicated, but its actual text is just like the most average JRPG you'll ever play ever. And so, like, you get, like, a whiplash from the juxtaposition. You're like, is this supposed to be deeper than it is? And you can't tell, I can't tell.
And then, like, all this happens, and then the guy named Roger Bacon shows up and says, oh, I'm gonna go off for a spot of tea. Back to London I go. And it's just like, okay, fucking what?
Yeah. And as he's receding, and Yuri is chasing after him, he yells, "Bacon!" Which is one of the game's very few dubbed lines, and it's amazing. I mean, we've kind of been talking about all the serious stuff, but this game is incredibly goofy, not always in a good way.
And never intentionally.
I'm pro the Grandma Scary story. I loved that.
Fucking, oh my god, I forgot about that.
I was dying. I was doubled over in laughter when she started doing the sounds.
Oh,
but at the same time, I've been told ghost stories just like that. It was like, she just like really... It's like the right way of doing it, but it's so fucking funny for it to just be so long and so complete in a video game.
Yeah, to spell this out absolutely, this is an 8.5 minute pre-rendered cutscene of still images with voice-acted narration, which for a good 2 minutes is an account of a monster emerging from the sea in which the narrator speaks the sound effects. It is genuinely uncomfortable to listen to. And I ended up having to listen to it twice. You can find it in, I think, the second stream I did. I had some emulator trouble that meant I had to go through it twice. And, oh god.
And it's...
unskippable.
Unskippable! Because of course, it's PS2. What did you want? Like, subtitles? Fuck you.
Yeah, most of the dubbed lines aren't also subbed.
Also, I don't know if this is true in most of the game, but when you get to Europe, all the times that Yuri's mysterious voice, like, talks to him are dubbed.
I think they all are. A few of the early ones I was talking over it, so I didn't hear. But
it's just mixed badly, but there is always a dub for some reason. Kudelka's dubbed.
Why is this not... What the fuck? What the fuck is this game's problem?
Another weird thing about this relation to mysticism is that it asserts that both psychics and Taoism are close to God. It's just and the god of it is like nondescript. It's basically one god, so you can even interpret it as the Abrahamic god, except the one god is a space alien from outer space.
Yeah, it's basically deism, except like JRPG-ified. So you get to fight it.
It's deism, but God comes back at the end. Which I guess is a possibility. I don't know of any major deistic religion that is focused on, well, maybe if we pray hard enough, God will come back. Would it be interesting? And this game is incredibly goofy, and I think that helps it get away with stuff as well.
I feel like the psychics are Akira references too, but I actually don't know that. But that just seems like the imagery they're going for with Hallie and Godelka, which is also just like, I'm going to put this in the game because it's cool. I like it. I think it's cool. And it's just like, wow.
Yeah, that's basically how this game got made, I think. Man, this game is like hard to pinpoint a part to talk about because like we're just kind of stumbling through it.
We picked like subtext to talk about first, but like the text of the game is that Yuri's dumb as shit, and it has a character arc very similar to Final Fantasy VII, where he has personal trauma that he needs to get over, and he does it with the help of his love interest, basically. But it's a lot less like nuanced or complicated than Final Fantasy VII. It's just like really aggressive about like you should help each other and work together to, you know, get past these things and live for now instead of hanging around in the past. And it's very cool that it takes place in the graveyard of Yuri's mind, but it's like it's almost devoid of substance at the same time. I liked it. I enjoyed the whole I'm gonna fight my ghost dad, who is myself actually, and then get over myself. But it's also just like,
yeah, it's just like how can I make it like fuck? I don't know how to describe it. It's just like let's take this allegory and make it literal, and then make it like happen in his mind graveyard, which is a literal thing and a game mechanic that you have to deal with. He has a graveyard in his brain.
I'm like really pro like abstracted spaces that represent things and metaphors in JRPGs, but like Shadow Hearts is doing a really like a really neat creative allegorical thing, and then just like using it as a hammer, a big giant hammer, to be like, oh, Yuri's tortured.
My favorite part is when like you have to fight Atman to get the good ending, and it's just like Alice is stuck inside Yuri's brain graveyard, and then he breaks into his own brain graveyard to fight alongside her, and it's just like that.
No, I mean, you got to remember they go through the brain graveyard and into like the void beyond.
Yeah, because apparently he has like a gateway to the god of death just in his brain graveyard, which I will never stop saying, and I wish we didn't have to call this episode I Can't Believe It's Not Vacant, because brain graveyard or Thou Hast Not Won Even Once would both be very good options. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, you spend a lot of time in the brain graveyard, actually, because the mechanic is, as you fight random encounters, you rack up malice, and if you leave your malice at max, super bosses appear, except they're not very super. I mean, in the first part of the game, you have to deal with Foxface, and he might be hard if he shows up. I never ran into him. In the second half of the game, the masks actually, by the time you get to that part of the game, would be trivial, because they only have like 2,000 health.
Okay, another thing is that your escape rate's 100%, so actually the mechanic does nothing.
Your escape rate is not 100%.
Is it not?
No.
I failed an escape. One, while grinding for mass.
Well, anecdotally, I have never failed a mistake. One of my escapes.
The fail rate is really low.
And also, you can do it with all your characters. You don't like lose turns, except for the one who tried it. I will say, they're not completely like trivial, because if you don't have the Grail, they will curse you. And even if you have the Grail for the good ending, and you fight them in the wrong order, they'll hit you with some really annoying ring ailments that you can't get rid of, which is awful. By the way, let's talk about the Judgment Ring. It's wonky, is weird and allegorical and literal and what the fuck.
I mean, the Judgment Ring is basically timed button presses to do things.
Yes, but also for everything.
It's mostly used in combat, but it is also used for a bunch of other stuff in a kind of QuickTime event, button mashy FF8 kind of way.
You can read the menu, and it is actually supposedly allegorical that it's like your luck or like the whims of fate, except the player has to hit the timing button.
Yeah, the thing is, like, fucking actual Roger Bacon gives you a spiel about how the fucking Judgment Ring is like the destiny and outcomes and stuff, and you doing the Judgment Ring is tweaking destiny in your favor, and it's just like, okay, but why is it on this door though? Why is it a literal thing and not like a symbol? Why are we fighting the final boss on the Judgment Ring? What is going on with this game symbology? Do you know what symbols are?
See, now I just want to make a really complicated meta read of this about how this expresses the kind of interactivity that's actually at work in a narrative game where the player isn't really making decisions about what happens, they're just kind of nudging things in the right direction here and there.
Except I would point to literally any of the Zero Escape series for that instead.
I mean, it's a bad read. I'm not saying it's a good read. I'm just, particularly, I think it's giving this game far too much credit.
I want to point out the most difficult Judgment Ring is running on a treadmill, and put that just right next to Roger Bacon's speech about it being deciding your fate and stuff.
Yeah,
this is going to decide whether you get a good thing from the moon, because running on a treadmill for 10 ring spins gets you to send Roger Bacon to the moon, and then he comes back and hands you a moon rock shaped like a fist weapon. Fuck.
Also, when we say Roger Bacon here, we mean the Roger Bacon from Kuldilka, who is a different person than the Roger Bacon introduced in Shadow Hearts. And Roger Bacon
who is actually not Roger Bacon.
Yeah, he's not Roger Bacon. He has the fake name syndrome, which happens a lot in anime and JRPGs. And Roger Bacon's actually Albert Simon, a made-up person.
Because it matters a lot that Roger Bacon was a historical figure.
Roger Bacon's a real person, but Albert Simon's not.
Well, he was a real person. He's not actually immortal and living in Wales.
In Shadow Hearts, no, he only exists in Shadow Hearts fiction, whereas Roger Bacon was a person.
I know,
in
but...
history. I know, it doesn't matter. But yeah, that Roger Bacon is kind of like a Master Roshi character, the actual Roger Bacon, for some reason.
Yeah.
Master Roshi?
Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball.
Okay.
Perverted old man.
Right, yeah.
But then, the other Roger Bacon, who is Albert Simon, was he Catholic? He's a Catholic
He's
cardinal,
Catholic, yeah.
Who became a warlock because he didn't agree with the Catholic Church.
I mean, same. God.
There are two alternatives in life: Catholic or Warlock.
Those are the two genders.
The Catholic Church is like a superpower that has forbidden magic texts.
Oh no,
that's the whole world.
That's what it reminds me of. Playing this reminded me of fucking a certain magical index. Oh no!
What?
See, that's funny because it reminded me of Simple Gear.
Oh no, that's also bad. Which is bad anime time.
I'm afraid these references are somewhat passing me by.
I'll explain mine first. In the 4th season of Simple Gear, there is a character who was raised in Rome during, obviously, the peak of Rome's empire, so the peak of Rome's slavery. And she was a slave. And so she's been working for hundreds of years in order to revive God and use God's power to create a socialist utopia where there are no more hierarchies. So actually it would be anarcho-socialism. And she's framed as the villain for doing this, of course.
Of course.
But as it turns out, she's tricked and she gets... the old organization that started the whole initiative was duplicitous and tricking her, but whatever. That's actually not how Albert Simon works. But then Albert Simon has a similar backstory where, frustrated with the injustices committed by the Catholic Church's connections to the monarchy, he at first strives to make everyone on equal terms and try to eliminate hierarchies in English society, but then he becomes a warlock and decides that he can create a new order by summoning God And it's pretty vague at that point whether or not he wants to just destroy our humans or restart humanity with him as the leader. He doesn't actually say either way. But yeah, that was like the villainous info gear as well, and I was like, lol.
My comparison to the certain adjective noun fucking universe.
Index.
Yeah, basically it's a world where espers are people with natural powers that they can then develop. But there is a secret, like, underworld where mages, who are people without natural powers, do all sorts of magic bullshit, and the protagonist is an idiot who gets stuck with a holy girl who came from the church that has a deep, scary power that she can use, and people wander for it. And the solution to everything is just punch it. Because that's a certain magical index. Yeah, that's a more shallow read, but also, Yuri and Kamicho-tome are bad.
What even is Alice's power? They don't even say it. Like, she's just a holy girl. She just has the connection to God.
Yeah, basically, like,
but isn't God an alien?
Yeah, but like he can use Koudelka too, and he had that already lined up. Like, I don't get it either. Why did he need Alice ever?
Well, I mean, Dehwai needed Alice, right, for summoning the first god, which actually they never really dealt with the fact that Yuri ends up with a dormant explosive god inside him.
No, you do.
I think the lore there is, yeah, they do deal with that, of course.
They do, because one of the final things you can do is go into your brain graveyard and fight your dad with Yuri alone to get closure, and by doing so, you prove that you have the power to control the seraphic gradients, and then you get it as a fusion.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I forgot that it's like the last optional thing that I didn't do because I couldn't do the 10 ring thing.
That's actually completely irrelevant. Because, like, I was trying to get the 10 ring thing to spawn to happen, and, like, fucking, he gave me the pulse tract. Did you get the dirty magazine early in the game?
I think so.
Because that's actually crucial, which is
That's
stupid.
Mandatory. You have to give it to Roger Bacon. He gives you another valuable item, and then you read that. You go through the fucking rainbow maze again. You get a different item, which you have to do that fucking 3 times for that fucking dungeon. I hate it. And then you go into your graveyard, and it's just like, oh, hey, the sunset is just like you remember from your childhood. Then you try to leave, and his dad shows up, and just like, hey, I'm storing the seraphic radiance in me. Beat it out of me, son. And then you get to turn into this weird, like, Dark Jasper-looking motherfucker. Like, he has Yuri's hair, but it's just, like, a weird angel figure with red eyes. And it's just like, okay.
Fair enough. I thought that you needed to do the moon thing first, so I just skipped that bit.
I want to lay out that the connection that's happening here is that you need to find a porn magazine in China to talk to Yuri's dad and have a final farewell with Yuri's dad.
Yep. You have to give a porn magazine from China, a legendary porn magazine, to Master Roshi figure to get a holy text to read and go find an artifact that will let you fight your dad in your brain graveyard.
I mean, we've had quite serious discussions in the last 40 minutes, but this game is bullshit.
Yes, it is. Also, we haven't discussed the fact that you can make infinite money once you have all the discount cards at shops. If you can do QTEs forever, and I ended up making like 1.8 million off of fucking 200k.
Yeah. So the discounts in shops is a cool thing, right? You do some optional stuff. You can collect a series of items which give you the opportunity to unlock increasing discounts on any purchase in a shop and increasing bonuses on any sale in a shop. So you select something to buy, it says, do you want to try to get a discount on this? And you do a series of judgment rings, and if you do them, like, 1 is worth a 10% discount, 2 is worth like 20, and 3 is like 30.
Yeah, it's 10 for each level.
Right, okay. And if you do 5 on the regular, you can get half price each time, and between that and being able to make 150% back on sales, you can make a profit.
Yeah.
And, like, there's the core of a cool idea in there, but it's just basically more judgment rings.
It's infuriating. I did it for 3 hours. I fucking hate myself for being able to do that.
Did you even have anything to spend that much money on?
I fucking paid for acupuncture because everything costs like $300K to get those fucking acupuncture on the final weapons.
I just didn't bother.
I did it like 3 or 4 times back and forth, and I ended with like 600K, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, and just maxed out Yuri's weapon and bought some stuff and left.
I mean, I finished the game with like 800,000 anyway.
I was also the first one to get through the game, and I was worried about the final dungeon, and then I realized that the final dungeon is nonsense, and I told you both, and I was just like, don't bother. Just don't fucking bother, because, like, oh, there's a split party segment. It's 4 screens long. Because this game can't even do that right.
The right way to do that is not to do it at all, so...
The final dungeon is extremely easy. It's actually the hardest fight is against the Seraphic Radiance. And you actually do need your ultimate weapon there, but you don't need the acupuncture. You just need to put yourself in the back row and have the best weapon.
Yep.
And then once you get the Seraphic Radiance, Yuri's taking like single digit damage and can easily break the damage cap, so it's just completely overkill.
Fucking Seraphic Radiance has 2 spells available at the without going berserk and letting it unlock the 3rd spell. It's for everyone and for tomorrow. For everyone buffs all of the stats on your party 30%, and for tomorrow hits everything for non-elemental damage and heals you the entire party. And it's just like, I wish I had anything that was good, that was that good 15 hours ago. Because it's like you get to use it on like 3 bosses. It's so satisfying though. And then the final boss is a fucking joke because of all the shit you have. Oh my god.
The silver hand monkey paw thing is really satisfying, actually.
It's incredible.
So, silver hand, monkey paw, 7th key, bam.
Yeah. Basically, it's a technique that means that you can get 21 hits on a judgment ring with no challenge factor at all, just by mashing. And then you can do a string of 7 perfect combo attacks, with every hit being a crit.
And triple damage because monkey's paw. It's just like, nothing in the game could fucking stand up to this. Like, I'm still amazed that they made an eternal key item in the sequels. Like, just go until you fuck up. And it's just like, can you even fuck up with the silver hand? Like, how would you let that end?
I mean, if you used them both, wouldn't it just softlock the game?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think you can let it just spin out and it'll finish, maybe?
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe.
God.
This game is... I actually, not in a terribly high intensity way, enjoyed it. Because it felt like being back to JRPGs that I know. Like, my whole paradigm of the JRPG is a much more modern thing than either of yours, I think. And so this was, like, coming home for me. It felt really breezy, but it is nonsense.
My paradigm for JRPGs is literally starting after this game, so that's false.
I liked it, but it's also just because I'm dumb. Like, all the art in the game is amazing to me, even though everything else is just not there.
Yeah, no, like, the visuals are great, and I mentioned the boss designs earlier. The boss designs they're a lot. They're intense, and that's always it's usually a good thing.
We haven't talked about, like, the general plot. That's fine. Probably don't play this game, but, like, the plot is Yuri fights a old British man who wants to summon God. That's it.
We should mention that when Yuri first meets Alice, there's a couple of scenes where he's really fucking skeevy.
Yeah.
Those were really uncomfortable, and they're right at the start of the game.
They're less skeevy, like, they are skeevy, but they're less skeevy than you think because the models went out on you, and you couldn't see what the animations were.
That's true.
They weren't as skeezy as, like, the worst case scenario, but yeah, it's not great.
I got constant warned ahead of time for that, and yeah. I mean, Yuri's sitting way far away, and it's supposed to be a joke, but I mean, obviously.
So it's more he's thinking about it than...
Out loud, yeah.
Right, okay.
He's being like a nice guy fuck up, where he's like, I did all this for her, now she's not even talking to me or doing anything, what the fuck, kind of thing. Because that's who he was at the start of the game.
Yeah, he's a jerk at the start of the game. And he starts out a jerk, but he changes very quickly.
He still kind of ends up a jerk too.
I mean, yeah, he's kind of he immediately changes because, like, he has, like, the entire point of him, like, just wandering around the fucking world is he doesn't have a purpose, and then the voice in his head literally tells him, hey, protect this girl, this is your fucking purpose now. And he's just like, okay, I'm fine with that. And she seems alright.
It's more that, like, helping her makes the headaches go away.
I mean, that too, but he found something to do. Like, its headaches are kind of tertiary, because like, oh, okay, I can help you out with whatever. And then he gets his shit kicked in by God invading his brain graveyard. Oh god. There's multiple gods. It's like an earth god instead of the space god.
I was thinking about it, and that might be the heaven god, and then there's also a space god.
Fucking...
These are some stretched nouns we are using here.
Okay, we have questions. If we can want to move on to those.
I have like a spiel about the game's art style, if that matters.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking about how what people call Lovecraft horror is like it's a place where modernist or like more abstract arts are allowed to come out, you know, because they're like purposefully uncomfortable or wrong or whatever. So people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense in this context. And I can't make it to a deep point because it's Shadow Hearts, but I think it's interesting that aesthetics developed in order to better represent post-industrial capitalism are just like everywhere in Shadow Hearts. But it's not that complicated. But at the same time, like I think it's like a counterpoint to the conservatism that JRPGs can almost always fall into, maybe.
How do you mean? Can you give some examples of like the bits of the art style that you're talking about? Because I'm not really following you. Sure.
You can think about how. So like when an RPG portrays religion, they often I don't think they're usually as grotesque as Shadow Hearts. Like I can think of a few exceptions to that already, but like usually they are like terrifying, but in a beautiful way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Shadow Hearts goes for like the three-headed Pope, or it goes for the weird asymmetrical model that is the Messiah that Albert Simon turns into.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm saying is that Shadow Hearts is not afraid to be ugly and find beauty in stuff that's ugly, or even like try to like retroactively say these things are good in this world, or these things have a point or a purpose, as in that Albert Simon is not an evil person necessarily. Or Albert Simon is gray, more ethically, I should say, ethically gray. But like when his methods, as demonstrated by his model, like, he transforms into something gross and evil.
Mm.
And I guess you could look at that as like a condemnation of it. But I was kind of looking at it like Yuri himself. Yuri's the hero of the story, right? But when he transforms, he doesn't turn into like a cool DBZ thing. He turns into a fucked up, awful looking demon.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has a lot of baggage, and he's not like as an orphan and a vagabond, he's not really accepted by the world, and so his heroism manifests in a way that's ugly to look at. But like that's okay. The Shadow Hearts is like that's okay. Yuri can do things too. Yuri can have friends. People can like him. People will be drawn to him because he's a good person, or because he's trying to be a good person. And all I'm saying is that Shadow Hearts has like this brings out like unconscious ugly things to what is normally a normal, nonchalant, comfortable mode of storytelling, right? Because it's just like the JRPG or an action manga. And you could look at it as a dissonant juxtaposition, or you could look at it as like kind of a offhand condemnation. But for me, it was just kind of oddly comforting, I guess. It's like, it's the kind of shit I think is cool without... Like, I think it's cool, and then like Shadow Hearts isn't being like super serious about these aesthetics either. So like, I can, like, in a way to make sense of my personal feelings, it's like my personal taste that was developed by trauma is seen and acknowledged in the game, but I don't have to grapple with any trauma while playing it because Shadow Hearts is normalizing all this excess and is even saying that, like, the good guys can look ugly too.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, there's something in that, because a lot of these stories where it you know, fundamentally this wants to be like a happy-go-lucky adventure story under all the gothic trappings. No, wants to be is the wrong word. Like, this story structure is that same very simple story structure. A lot of the time, it would be sanitized, right? Everything that happens would be fundamentally not grotesque. And like here, now the grotesque has a large space in the story, and it's just there, right? Normalizing is I'm not sure normalizing is the best word, but it's the best one I can think of.
Yeah, normalizing is usually used in a pejorative context, but I just mean it's like empathetic's a weird word too, but like, you know, it's not being really essential about what is categorically good, I guess, in a way that like fantasy often like just does accidentally or not really caring.
I mean, there are some senses in which we talk about normalizing things and mean it positively. Normalizing being trans, for example, just means, can just mean, sometimes doesn't, but can just mean, well, getting it to the point where everybody accepts people being trans just as much as we accept people being cis.
I guess when I say that, it's like, I like horror, I'm a fan of horror, but often horror is obviously trying to shock you or make you uncomfortable. And Shadow Hearts is like super happy-go-lucky and dumb, but like the reverse of that is that it's not trying to make you uncomfortable, shock you necessarily as hard. It's not gunning for it all the time. Like that's like its most unique aspect, I guess, is that it's just like this. It's treating horror like a rapper, but I found that just like really good to me. Instead of engaging with it at all, which is like I would like a game that tried to do more, but I was also like. I also love the game because it didn't try to do anything.
Yeah, the only time it really wallops you with how horrific and wibbly it is the Doll's House boss, which is already being like this Resident Evil super grotesque over the top horror thing anyway, and then you go into the final room of the dungeon and there's a doll on a rocking horse that's rocking despite nobody rocking it, and then there's the boss, which bloody hell, that's a boss design.
Well, it happens other times too, like the guy in the orphanage who's trying to revive his mom. Oh no, is his mom? Yeah, it's his mom. And then it's like, well, you can't, like, in the you can't do that kind of thing, she comes out like a horrible monster demon. But I'm not saying Shadow Hearts is perfect at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think probably the only time where, like, the horror actually kind of crept up on me and was like, boo! I was just like, oh god, that's a lot of faces with eyes in the final fucking the attack Atman has, which is just like because I looked away for a second and I wasn't expecting all those eyes.
That's awesome, actually. I was pretty in the mode of, man, this stuff's cool as shit. But the when I first went to Bistrix and saw the dog hand things, I'm like, oh, what are you doing? I don't like that one.
But yeah. I mean, it's a good collection of enemy models. It's not a large collection of enemy models. It's a good collection of enemy models. There's very, very few of them are stereotypical.
I mean, there's giant roaches, and then in the same dungeon, there's weird acrobats with their brain on a stick that are doing like a fucking stretch to hold it with their feet, and it's just like, what?
The funny thing I thought of is like Final Fantasy VII models actually are like sometimes the same collection of unidentifiable shapes, but since they don't have any textures, they're not horror.
Yeah. Ugh. This game's aesthetic is... I feel like if it was used by a more talented person, it wouldn't be as charming.
I listened to... It's rare for Shadow Hearts to come out of a video game because we're used to horror games to be like, we're trying to do one thing only, and that's to scare you. But I mean, I've listened to a lot of metal, and I've read horror subgenre stuff where it's just it's just like it's a goofy romp, but there's also vampires, right? And that's what Shadow Hearts is basically doing.
It's basically Goosebumps.
Goosebumps isn't always goofy, but yeah.
I mean, there was literally like,
yeah, I know.
I know you know, but there's a book in the original Goosebumps series that's just like, this kid made a potion that he found in an old book, and it like let him fly, and then his bully neighbor steals the shit and also makes it, and then he challenges him to a race around the neighborhood, and then he fucking pretends that he can't fly, and then his bully neighbor gets taken away by the military to look at all of his fucking flying secrets, and he's just like, haha, I can actually still fly, suckers. Being popular is the real scary thing. It's just like, okay, that's a Goosebumps book.
That's very Shadow Hearts in a lot of ways. Shall we do some questions?
Yeah. I just want to say, I'm glad this game was so short. I don't think I could have taken more of it.
Yeah, it's particularly if you don't try to do all the optional stuff, which you don't need to do at all. Make sure you get the good end, because the bad end is bad.
Yeah, we have a question about that.
Well, we'll come on to it then. But apart from making sure you get the good end, don't do optional stuff. Just finish the game.
Yep.
It's not really structured for there to be that much more either, though. Like, the game just, like, does its stuff and ends. Like, I didn't feel like it was trying to egg for more time, or it could have had more time, and that's pretty good, too.
Yeah, like, honestly, I could have also seen them just, like, not do the weird bit with Yuri getting fused into Seraphic stuff and vanishing, and, like, if that first Shanghai bit was just the entire arc, and then they worked it into, like, actually concluding, that would have also felt pretty right to me, honestly.
Yeah, well, usually console games have to be X number of hours, right? Because, like, these two halves are both normally the length of an RPG Maker RPG, basically. And they're just put together, so...
Yeah. Okay, we have questions. I'm gonna try and accurately represent how this fucking question came in. From Salary, let girls transform into unbearable monsters from beyond! That was awful audio. There were clap emojis. I tried to simulate them.
It. You did your best.
I did my best. That was directed to Becky. I would like to say to Salary, that's true from the New World, but that also has issues with Native Americans, so...
It's from the New World?
Huh?
Is the protagonist a girl from the New World?
No. The leading lady is a Native American girl who also has transformation powers, I believe.
Oh, but she's the Harmonixer, but she's not the protagonist?
Yeah. The protagonist from the New World has a bunch of stupid, like, EGAD gadgets that he does stuff with. There's definitely a vacuum in there. That's not just a random reference I just made. Also from Sorry, what did you think about the game's timed hit system, and how does it compare to timed hit systems in other games?
So this has been, timed hits are a point of contention among us anyway. And with this game, it's been a particular point of contention because I found this gauge really easy to read and that's really easy to work with, and that's perfect for me because I'm bad at timed hit systems otherwise. Devin, you have a quite strongly different opinion.
I'll be honest, I kind of like the really clear UIs now with timed hits. Like, if I was going to have timed hits in a game, I'd prefer it to be like Legend of Dragoon or Shadow Hearts. But I'm also just like, I just don't want to do it. Like, there came to a point where I would do a perfect hit every single time when I was casting spells especially, but even with, like, Keith's kind of difficult judgment ring, I was just hitting the red area every time. When I'm hitting the red area...
Dang.
Yeah. And when I'm hitting the red area every time, I'd just rather not be doing it. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. My issue in particular is not something that... Well, it is something that different characters in this game have issues with, but I'm not super fond of gauges that don't relate to actual animations or anything like that, like any other actual component of the attack or like the action you're doing. And also, this game has fucking judgment QTE bullshit for tossing items. You can get a critical item. That's dumb. You can miss a turn because you spaced out for like half a second and it spun past and you missed a turn and wasted it. That's also kind of dumb.
Yeah. The big problem with timed hit games is they require a lot more attention. And I don't think I've ever played one that actually rewards all that extra attention.
Nope.
Maybe Thousand Year Door, kind of, but not really.
Mario games are closest to being that sort of rewarding because, like it's the sort of thing that's like engagement is kind of a flimsy discussion point to have, but a lot of people they lose focus on RPGs because they're not engaging enough, and Mario games are definitely, you need to constantly be focusing on this game, for better or worse.
I single out Thousand Year Door specifically because there's so much more going on in a Thousand Year Door battle screen visually than in most of the games, because there's the whole theatre thing, right? That, I think, is where that paying attention, just to notice all the details and who's in the audience and stuff, is maybe worth it. But for the most part, just let me select the commands from a menu and let them play out. Also, the attack animations in this game are too long. They're so long.
I think, in my opinion, if you fail a judgment ring or a mechanic like that, you should at least do the spell at half strength and not just say, "Oh, it's done," because your party can wipe, for example, because you missed a spell or an item, and that does not feel good.
That's another part of my problem with this is like the acceptable range of how you press these things are better than like Legend of Dragoon, where it's just like, do you continue the combo or not? But also, if Legend of Dragoon had fucking QTEs for items and magic, like specifically, I would be like, no, that's bad actually. Because like the bottom, like the worst outcome you can get from a turn, if you goof this in Shadow Hearts specifically, is you lose a turn. That was never the case with Dragoon. Even with like whatever you wanted to toss, if you wanted to do an attack, you'd get something out. So like the bottom line is literally rock bottom with this if you fuck up the QTEs.
Well, I mean, it is entirely possible for a game to have an action command system where if you press the button at the wrong time, like, it actually penalizes you. Which I don't think I've ever seen a game do, but, like, I'm sure there's a game out there that does that.
That'd be the next step.
Yeah.
Deal half your life if you screw up.
At present, this is the rock bottom for what I'm acquainted with. And I'm not fond of it. And also, like I mentioned, the complete disconnect from any sense of the action you're doing just doesn't help me, because like we've established since Legend of Dragoon that I'm a lot more like kinetic in my like reading of stuff than y'all are. That's why I fucking crushed Legend of Dragoon. But yeah, I have had that same issue with Arts and Ellico 2, which has a similar like, you can't read enemy attacks, you have to read the little gauge and press the button at the right time, which is not great.
Yeah, defensive QTEs are even worse than offensive ones, and don't do them.
Yeah, also, well, look forward to Mario and Luigi. It is better. Well, we'll talk about that later, but basically...
The animations in that game are really, really clear, though, which helps.
And also, like, the entire, like, mini-game of figuring out enemies' targeting can be basically turned off in the remake. And it's just like, no, you're being targeted by an attack now. They have a giant circle under them saying target. Okay, so we have a 3-part question from Tara, whose Twitter name I'm not going to try and pronounce. Number 1, did all of you bother to get the good ending, and would you say it was worth the effort?
I mean, it's worth the effort because it means the sequels aren't canon.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the difference between the good ending and the bad ending is whether or not the female lead gets fridged. And I'm always going to be in favour of the female lead living.
Yeah.
Generally, so...
And we've also had the discussion, like, this game has 3 competent non-evil female characters. Not explicitly evil, because, like, Kawashima's got some stuff going on. But Kawashima, one of the leading ladies in the Shanghai arc, gets fucking executed in her wrap-up story in the second half, where she shows up and like, oh, this dude sent us a letter to tell us that he's really sad that his interest got executed, and her dying for his grieving is not great.
Yeah. It's a waste of a character.
They're actually 2 way different endings, too. I would assume. I didn't actually look at the other ending because I don't care about it at all. I'm not invested in it. But I'm assuming it's kind of like a Final Fantasy VII thing where the love of Yuri's life, as far as he knows or can tell, dies. And so he has to figure out how to keep on living without, putting all of his emotions into... Like, I mean, their relationship in Shadow Hearts isn't very... It's very patriarchal in the first place. So there's not a lot you get out of Alice being removed from the story. And there's not a lot you get out of her staying in the story, so of course I'd rather her be alive. But like, I even think the other ending is like more resonant or even more empty, because what happens is that you have this long shot of Alice and Yuri being really happy together, that they finally, no one's pursuing them, no one's going to fight them anymore. And then it juxtaposes that with immediately that World War I breaks out, and everything's going to be changed. And, that they could not prevent that great atrocity. And it has to be, and it's on purpose. They're obviously saying that what you did at Shadow Hearts is this kind of, to quote that meme scene in Pat Labor, that what you did is like an unjust peace, basically. And that, like, you're not necessarily the clear-cut hero of the story. Whereas if you get the bad end in Shadow Hearts, you have a very downer end for Yuri, and then you get this downer end for the world. And that doesn't match the tone of the game at all.
I mean, okay, so you don't save the world from World War I, but like, you can't hold individual people responsible for that. Like, I don't really see that as a dissonance in that, or a discord.
Well, I just mean, normally in a JRPG, when you defeat the villain, you also have there's a period of stability and peace afterwards. Like, everything is at peace. In Shadow Hearts, it doesn't work out like that, because Shadow Hearts is not a video game about tackling everything. Even though it's a game about killing God, it's a God that only you know about. And so you get a piece, but it's a piece that only you can, or only these characters have the knowledge of understanding, kind of thing. So what I mean is it's very disconnected from a world politic.
Yeah, I kind of prefer that, though, like the neat fantasy ending where everything is wrapped up and there are no conflicts anymore, or is just always completely bland and uninteresting.
Right. That's actually basically the point I was making. Like, they didn't stop the world from being, the world. They're just living in it. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say.
Right, okay. Yeah, just thank God there's no perfect ending where miraculously beating the float does in fact stop World War I somehow.
Yeah, see, that would be awful, actually.
I feel like that's what would happen if you made Shadow Hearts today.
Yeah, probably.
I would say getting the good ending was worth the effort, and, like, specifically, the difference in effort between getting bad and good endings was minimal. Honestly, like, playing this game at all is kind of an effort. But
I kind of think it's weird that the ending's so hidden, but that's the only barrier from you not getting it, is that you might not know you need to kill the masks or not. Because if you attempt the end at the end of the game, or if you attempt the ending once you have the grail, like, the masks will die in, like, 4 hits. So it's not like you don't have to spend that much effort.
Well, I mean, you have to, like, grind them up and fight them in the right order, which, if the fucking staff mask misbehaves like it did for me, it takes a while.
That sequence took me an hour and a half, but I follow that as not taking any effort, because I'm just used to that by now.
yeah. So, part 2 of this question. Had you not played this game, would you have been more or less interested in playing any of its sequels or prequel?
I'm sort of interested in Koudelka.
I was about to say that.
I don't want to go near the sequels. Like, the game is dumb in a way that makes me think that unless the sequels were radically different, they're just going to be gross. And we know, like, we've found some of the ways in which they're gross, and they're gross.
Yep.
Content warnings for several things for the sequels.
I'm curious about Koudelka, but I feel like Shadow Hearts is very finished, and so the impulse of making a sequel to it is just like, we have this IP and we got to keep using it, kind of thing. So I don't really care.
Yeah, pretty much. Do you have any hopes the other games might improve on this one enough to be more worthwhile? Did this game leave you optimistic about where else the series might take itself, or has it left you feeling so unimpressed you can't imagine the rest of the series could fix what's wrong with its aesthetic choices? I don't think the aesthetics are the bits where this is going wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just speaking from my feelings, but I feel like I can make a case for not for the mysticism, but for the more general monster aesthetics. I think are pretty, like, they're good. But no, I don't have any confidence in any of the games being any better per se. Because the Shadow Hearts is like a game made by a more adolescent Yoko Taro, and so it's like it's like just luck basically that Shadow Hearts came out pretty good, and I don't feel bad about playing it. And I think if you keep playing more of these games, you're just rolling the dice about how everything dumb is actually going to be offensive at the same time too.
Yeah, not to mention this is the sort of dumb that came out fucking a decade plus ago. So it's just like, ugh. I
mean, I just, like, if you heard a disc box opening, that was me getting the Folklore disc off my shelf.
God, and Folklore
is cool.
Like, I'm wondering whether there's an inheritance of Folklore from Koudelka and Shadow Hearts, and there is definitely room for JRPGs that play with European mythology in this way, and you could do interesting things with it. I wouldn't necessarily want to get the Shadow Hearts team back together to do that.
I've seen petitions for Shadow Hearts 3, because the third Shadow Hearts game is not Shadow Hearts 3. But yeah, I don't actually want a Shadow Hearts 3.
Nah.
I don't want a Shadow Hearts 2, so...
Yeah.
Also, the most shameful aesthetic choice is that ooh in the music in fucking Shanghai.
I had no idea what you were saying at first.
God,
I don't remember the fucking, like, I don't remember the music.
Yeah,
I just remember the ooh. It's just awful. That's
they
awful
liked-
audio for this podcast
Oh.
too, but
You gotta leave those in. I like the song for Rowan, I think, the European town. That song is extremely
the
good.
French town.
Yeah, there's some good songs in the soundtrack, and then there's
Mostly
also
the London one. The London one is excellent.
ooh. There's a lot of oohs. Honestly, I've listened to a lot of like bedroom ambience, so that stuff did not surprise me. I've heard those since before. I know it, like I'm familiar with them, so I was like, yeah, this is a cheesy ambient. But then everyone's like, what the hell is this?
That particular noise on the first random encounter battle theme is just... It gets so grating so quickly. Oh, God.
I think it fits the tone, if nothing else.
Like I was listening to other things, and then I would just hear that in gaps between my fucking headphones. I was just like, "What the fuck is that?" Oh, right, I'm playing Shadow Hearts. Oh.
Oh, man.
Okay, question 3. I had another question, but I can't think of it because all I can think about suddenly is, oh god, why was Hate a maggot with stockinged leg? What was even the point of that?
That was a good boss design.
I liked that God had these minions that had no point to being there. Classic JRPG, but with, Shadow Hearts art.
God. Okay, from Pasokon Deacon. During my playthrough, I often checked each new item in the menu for flavor text. What's your perspective on the various item descriptions and how they flesh out themes and world building? I don't like Dark Souls lore.
I didn't realize they had descriptions till the end of the game, so I wasn't going to read all of them. Sorry. I guess my impression of it is that when it's buried that much, you're going to get like people like me who'll just never see it. So good and bad.
And it clearly, none of it was going to be vital to the story or sufficient to restore the story, because each item gets a sentence, basically. And that's never going to be...
I don't want to sound like a jerk, but there's also no way the Shadow Hearts lore is comprehensible in any way.
It's just as slapdash as its approach to mysticism. Like the monk earrings, it's just like, oh, these are gold-plated wood earrings. They make you get experience with and not have as much sanity. I don't know. Monks use them. They're monk earrings.
Because this is a game where both psychics are the same as, or they're close to angels. They're basically nuns or monks in their own right by virtue of being psychics. So it's like, I don't know, whatever.
And also, you have a party member that has a magical cell phone that calls in military reinforcements to drop water on people.
Marguerite is good, and I will fight you.
She has an Illuminati phone, that's what it is. That's how they work.
So good! Shit just drops out of the sky into a hand.
Yeah, I need a grenade. Right where I am. No, not with the pin pulled. I'll do that. Bye. Fucking. Okay. And here's a doozy. From Roger Bacon, at Madame Colleen. That has not won even once? So, we should explain that, because we haven't gotten around to explaining thou has not won even once. Do you want to do the honors, Leroy?
Well, the problem is that it's impossible to explain. The whole reason the phrase sticks out is that there's multiple occurrences of the phrase "thou hast not won even once," but it does not exist in the Japanese script. And when the characters talk to each other about it, it's offered as this familiar phrase that they all know. They know this phrase "thou hast not won even once," but what does the phrase mean? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be some sort of supernatural spoopy motif where there'd be an optional boss if you said it to the right person or something.
I actually expected a really cheesy cutscene where Kodelka explained to Holly why they passed down "thou hast not won even once," but no, it's not like that either. It's just they looked each other in the eyes randomly in the middle of a dramatic cutscene. Holly just stares down Yuri and says, "Thou hast not won even once," then they leave. And then later Yuri's like, "Yeah, thou hast not won even once," back to him.
And then his mom says it to him, and it's just like, what?
Yeah. The moment Hallie and Kodelka reunites, she's like, "Remember, Hallie, thou hast not won even once." I don't know.
Nobody knows what this is about. There's a speculation that it's the wrong. It's a translation of some other line from the fighting pit or something, and it just got put in the wrong place in the game's code or something.
That almost makes sense, I guess. Just a complete screw up. The weirdest thing is it almost feels right, like it's the beat where you're supposed to say something like that, but not that. That's not a thing anyone says.
Jesus. The fun thing is I looked up the localization company to list it in the credits, and they have fucking 5 games to their credit. One of them is Dragon Warrior 7. And I was just like, did they fucking get their files mixed up? What happened?
Also, the localization in this game is actually pretty... It's like bad and not in a way that I find like enhances the game or is entertaining. It's just like a very third grader English at the end of the game, basically. It reads like a rush job TL. It's like a scanlation that came out in one day. That's what the back half of the game reads like.
There are definitely some wonky bits.
Yeah. So, second part of this submission, I remember seeing an ad for this game somewhere, a Zine or something, and I've always been curious about this game at the very least aesthetically, and I'm very shallow, exactly shallow enough to play a game because it looks cool. Persona 5. Do you think this game or series is interesting enough to play, or should I toss it in the don't play list?
I was the exact amount of shallow to play because it looked cool, and I was rewarded for that. It looked cool, and I played the whole game, and it was cool at the end.
Yeah, I think that's the basis on which to play it. I would not put this on the famous DGC never play this shit list.
I would put it on my personal I would advise against it list.
I mean, there's not a lot in it, but if what you want is something visually interesting, that it does that. And if you want a PS2 as heck JRPG, it does that too, I think.
And it's not like you're digging out Kemco game either. Like, it's interesting by itself to justify playing, and it's cool and looks cool. It's just not like deep or anything, or even like it's not even. It's like beyond not being deep, where it's just so aggressively stupid that you're left stunned. But it's cool
Several times.
Yeah, and this is the sort of thing that people will point to. It's just like, this is my favorite RPG, and I'm just like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. There's definitely better options.
The thing is, it's actually really similar to Chrono Cross, and that Chrono Cross is super stupid, but accidentally in like a different way. But Chrono Cross is actually serious, and Shadow Hearts is not.
Yeah.
Chrono Cross accomplishes mood, which Shadow Hearts kind of doesn't.
Shadow Hearts has a mood. It's dirty metalhead.
Yeah, okay, but like Chrono Cross has a repertoire of moods, and also like Chrono Cross is sometimes good looking. Sorry, Shadow Hearts is sometimes good looking. Chrono Cross is sometimes spectacularly good looking, but that's not necessarily an argument for playing Chrono Cross instead of Shadow Hearts, because Chrono Cross is heavier going. Like, it's just harder work to get through.
Yeah, I was just pointing out they're both like just have some of the dumbest plot developments ever.
This is true.
Part 3. Are the QTE rings stressful? I tend to find them a chore to deal with in most games that aren't Mario RPGs.
I wouldn't say they're stressful, but they are a chore.
Actually, I get stressed out by them sometimes. Just because it really was like, I need to do this heal or I'm going to lose this fight. And I didn't miss one of those, but if I did miss one of those, it would be really frustrating. And I felt, like, I wouldn't say my anxiety spiked or anything, but I usually don't have to feel like that when I play an RPG, like, ever, because I know I'm doing all the math already.
Yeah.
And there's no usually like, oh, if I can't press this button right, then all my math was pointless and I have to start over a half-hour fight. But Shadow Hearts has that.
Unless you play right on the margins of the level curve like Leroy always does, you're not going to be in that position.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you were kind of keeping all your characters at more or less the same level, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was swapping my party members and I didn't do any grinding until the end.
Yes, so not only was I not swapping my party members around a lot, but also I got lost a lot, which meant kind of accidental grinding. And it was very easy to stay at a position in the level curve where you were never in a heal or die position. The heal QTEs tend to be the easiest as well.
I like playing it really close too. Like, I only heal on the turn where I need to heal. And so, yeah, that's the problem in Shadow Hearts.
Yeah, not to mention, the entire thing kind of falls apart once you get Mind's Eye and put it on Yuri. Just like, fuck it.
I missed the first Mind's Eye, so I didn't have it for a long time too.
Yeah.
No, it's such a stupid accessory.
It shows up in fucking Covenant. And Covenant is apparently a game that has issues where it's just not difficult at all. And it's just like, cool. Not gonna make me play it though. Let me prepare for this collage of things that are definitely words in a very bad sentence. Last, and most importantly, who is Roger Bacon? Old philosopher? Monopoly Man villain? Weird gremlin man? A Wendy's sandwich? Are you Roger Bacon? Am I Roger Bacon? Is Roger Bacon the friends we made along the way? Love, Colleen.
All those things are true. That's Roger Bacon. That's it.
I'm Roger Bacon. We're all Spartacus.
Thanks, Colleen.
You know, I'm really glad that the game had to commit to calling him Roger Bacon. No one else has their last name, right? But it's always Roger Bacon.
Bacon! Oh dear. Just provided no one takes it as an instruction.
Please do not Roger Bacon.
That's been on my brain since the first day we were playing. I nearly made it without making that joke, but I couldn't. And I know that's what's been going through Colleen's head, because it's Colleen.
Well, fuck.
Wasn't that a note to end the podcast on?
Hell yes it was. Thanks for joining us for this episode of DGC. Next month, we'll take a look at Exist Archive, a spiritual successor to Valkyrie Profile produced by Trace in 2016, following the adventures of a bunch of dead teenagers who are trying to fix said problem. This is, aside from Pokemon, our newest game on the podcast, so it's still fairly easy to get a hold of if you'd like to play along on PS4 or the Vita. After that, we're playing Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, specifically the 3DS remake of the game, which was originally made on the Game Boy Advance. This game features the titular Mario and Luigi working to save the Mushroom Kingdom's neighbor, the Bean Kingdom, from an evil plot that starts by stealing Princess Peach's voice. The remake features several tweaks that will make the entire game easier, alongside an alternate story mode where you command Bowser's minions through a simple strategy RPG campaign to save Bowser. You can find our work on our website, jrpgsaredead.fyi, or our Twitter at jrpgsaredead, or individually at Invisifool for me, at Eat the Pen for Becky, and at Was Not Why Not for Leroy. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deadgenre. Also, please enjoy our affiliated podcast. I'm joined by Sam Howitt on Myth and Kin as we work our way through the Witcher franchise from books to games, though we had to postpone our recording, so the latest episode will be a wee bit later than usual. Leroy and John Thayer can once again be found on World Revolution discussing independent and underground RPGs. Both can be found on our Libsyn feed. Join us next time for episode 32 of Dead Genre Chronicles. Good night, everybody!